Recovery on Air, the official podcast of Crossroads Addiction Rehabilitation. Candid discussion about addiction and recovery with the people who have lived it, along with input from experts on the journey from struggle to triumph. Laugh, cry, and be inspired. And now, your host for Recovery on Air, Donna Alexander.
Welcome to Recovery on Air, the show in which we work to break the stigma of addiction by talking about it. I am your host, Donna Alexander. And today in the studio, we are so grateful to have a podcast alumni, Patricia Brooks, and she has brought somebody very special to her with her today to the show, her husband, Earl Goldmann. And Earl is also in recovery.
Yes, I am.
And he has written his memoir. So we are going to do this. We're so grateful that you're both here. And Earl, I can't wait to hear your story. Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and let's dig into it and let's hear a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, I'll start where I was born, right on the Oregon coast in Tillamook, Oregon, where it's famous for cheese. And I was a pretty good athlete. Coming out of Oregon, my class, I was one of the top athletes coming out of Oregon at the time. And I turned down scholarships to different universities. I turned down a football scholarship to Stanford, which I might not have turned down at this age. But it was 1950. Stanford wasn't exactly known for all their athletics as they are now. But I did take a scholarship to Oregon State to play baseball and basketball. And I enjoyed that. I came from a small town, and traveling around with the Beavers was a real treat for me. And I guess I got a teaching certificate and taught school and in Canby, Oregon, and Estacada. And I coached there, coached basketball and girls golf. And from there, I took a job teaching for a while, stopped that, and went on with selling textbooks to colleges and schools around Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and California. And traveled a lot and drank a lot, by the way. And and ended up leaving that job, went back to, I managed a golf course in Oregon called Vernonia, and went back to teaching eventually, and struggled along through the years with the alcohol. But eventually I got a divorce, moved myself to Arizona, and my next door neighbor was Patricia Brooks. And of course we met, and actually we met in a parking lot. She asked me if I would like to go on a heart walk with her, and I was working at the Phoenician then, driving a shuttle, and I said, no, I can't go, but maybe some other time. And so I went to work and had a heart attack.
That day when she asked you to go on a heart walk? Oh, was that a gut shot or what?
2 hours later, I had this heart attack.
Oh, my gosh, that's crazy.
So about a week or two later, I see Pat again, and I'm out of the hospital. And she says, where you been? I said, I've been in the hospital with a heart attack. Of course, she didn't believe me, of course. And but eventually I convinced her. And eventually I convinced her to marry me. And she stepped in to my life and really actually kind of saved me. Because I think if I'd have gone on drinking, and I would have lived probably a shorter time than I have already. And we've got 20 years together, and I contributed that to Pat helping me stop drinking.
Right. So how long sober do you have now then?
How long have I?
Been sober?
20 years.
20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you went kind of back and forth with your teaching situation. So were you teaching at, what kind of schools were you teaching at?
I was teaching in a high school, large high school in Oregon, the suburbs of Portland and the south side, named Canby, Oregon. And I enjoyed it. The school was great. It was a kind of an upscale suburb, upper middle class. We had good kids, and I really enjoyed it. The teachers were young guys and young gals, and we had a tremendous time, really.
So did you have any run-ins with your drinking while you were there teaching?
With
like situations that might have happened because you were drinking at the school? I had a 5th grade teacher who had a bottle in her bottom drawer.
No, I didn't have. Well, we had teachers that had bottles in the bottom drawer, but I didn't.
Yet?
Yeah, we did. But I never had a problem. I don't think I had a problem with alcohol and teaching, and I don't think I was a lesser teacher because of alcohol. Now, I went to school a few times with hangovers, but that's a good thing sometimes, because you really make sure the discipline is pretty hard when you're standing around with a hangover and students are acting up. You take control.
Do you remember your first drink?
Yes, I do. I was drinking with my friends in high school in Tillamook. Drinking beer, and it was basically a Friday night, Saturday night situation. It was the 50s were a drinking time in this country, but in this small town, it really was alcohol was major.
Yes.
And it was a lumber business, loggers, tough guys. We had farmers, farming industry with the cheese, and also it was partially a tourist town because we were close to the ocean. We got a lot of people from the valley came there.
Yeah.
But
and probably to tour the cheese factories. Did they let them do that too? To tour the cheese factory? Did they let them go inside the cheese factory? The Tillamook, isn't that where they made Tillamook cheese?
Yeah, right. That is where they make Tillamook cheese, right. Uh-huh. They actually have a satellite, they don't make it all there now. They have a production area in eastern Oregon that they use, but they have a huge factory there that is a real tourist spot. I mean, it's jammed with tourists that come to the Oregon coast. They go to Tillamook to see the cheese.
Yes.
Buy cheese and
that's where I would go.
Yeah.
For sure. So tell me a little bit more about your memoir and maybe some of the stuff that's in it, and why did you decide to write a memoir?
Well, I originally started to write it because I wanted to leave a little something for my grandkids and let them know who I was, what I was doing. And I started out, I wasn't going to put the alcohol in, and I wasn't going to put the depression in, and all the scabs, let's say. I wasn't going to put that stuff in there. But as I got going in it, I had to include them. I had to include the problem that I had with my father. That just as I started to write, they just got bigger and bigger, and so Pat, of course, encouraged me to tell it all, and I wrote pretty honestly about in my memoir. But I like memoir writing, and Pat introduced me to it, And I write with vignettes, kind of stories in the book. You can start anywhere in my book and read it front to back if you want, because it's stories about my life and my tribulations and tragedies and setbacks, and also the good times, humor. And I don't know.
It was a good experience for you then.
Oh, it's been fantastic. I just love the writing community. Pat has a writing group that I help her with, and I enjoy that. And I like memoir writing because you can solve your problems with it, really. Because once you start writing it and you let your mind go and do it honestly, you can really get into problems. And I like it also because you can get into the reader's head.
Oh,
you can write
nice.
for the reader as well. In your story, as he reads your story, he may take something from your story that appeals to him, or actually comes directly to him. And also you can inspire people.
Yes.
By coming back. My first book is Bounce Back, and my second one is Intestinal Fortitude. So I did a lot of bouncing back.
I bet. So what would you say in your book, or just in your life, what is one of your happiest or the happiest experience that you can think of?
The happiest experience? Well, there's a couple, of course.
Yes.
But one year when I went to Oregon State University to play sports, it was a dream that I had all through, from the 6th grade on. I wanted to play for the Beavers.
Oh, wow.
And I went to junior high playing sports, to high school playing sports, and then got a scholarship to Oregon State. And I was thrilled with that. And that first year, I played for a coach on the freshman team. Freshmen weren't allowed to play on the varsity at that time. And named Paul Valenti. And he coached me in both basketball and baseball. And it was the most wonderful time in my life. In fact, when he died at 93,
wow,
just before he died, I called him and told him that it was one of the most memorable years of my life. That I was very happy that I had met him and so on. It was very important to me.
And he was a good coach?
Oh, yes. Very inspirational.
That's good. That's good. So what about one of the most tragic times? If we're going to talk about memoirs, it's about the good and the bad.
Yeah, it is. Well, the most tragic thing in my life ended my playing basketball and baseball at Oregon State. I was in a car accident that killed my roommate.
Oof.
And killed a young Corvallis High School girl. And I was injured quite severely. Almost lost my right arm. And then there was one other girl who lived. But this accident ended my scholarships, ended my time at Oregon State, which was idyllic. It was fantastic. It was the greatest time of my life. And I had to recoup from that. And I ended up with guilt and PTSD for a lifetime, not just for a week, for a lifetime. I spent my life thinking about them dying and I living, and I still think about it. But I wrote about it, and it really helped me.
So survivor's guilt.
Yeah, survivor's guilt.
So can I ask what happened in the accident?
What, pardon me?
What happened in the car accident? How did it happen?
How did it happen? Well, yeah, that is kind of interesting in that it wasn't, alcohol had nothing to do with it. And of course we were in
Which is
college.
shocking, right?
Yeah, it was just surprising. And of course all our friends thought it was alcohol, and the teachers at Oregon State and so on. But we had a convertible, my roommate and I, and he had the convertible, and we went for a ride, and we went by this house, and these two young girls were standing in the front yard, 15 years old, Corvallis High School freshmen. I'm 21 years old, these girls are 15.
Yipes.
Yikes. That's right. And it was so innocent. He stopped, he knew the one girl, said, who lived, it said, would you like to go for a ride? And they finally got in the car. They were in the car 20 minutes, and we rolled it, and one of the girls was dead. I knew her 20 minutes, and she was sitting right next to me in the back seat, and was severely injured when she was killed, and decapitated, actually. And somehow I got knocked away from I did have a skull fracture and concussions and so on, but I was lucky, very lucky. And that accident ended my time at Oregon State, really. And I moved on to a smaller school, played a little bit more sports, but the accident stayed with me for life, and as I mentioned, PTSD is a real thing.
Yes.
And I drank, I think, to quiet it down, and the guilt, drank because of the guilt feelings. That has something to do with it. I
Right.
know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So when did you really start drinking?
When did I really start?
Yeah, like really, was it after the accident then you really got into the alcohol?
I think I really got into the alcohol when I got married. My mother-in-law drank a fifth of Seagram's every day,
Woo!
starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon every day of the week, 7 days a week. And
Yikes.
of course, my father-in-law was a great guy. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he was a great guy, but he would take a drink, and my wife would take a drink. And every time we were in their company, it was a lot of drinking. And so those years really got me into hard liquor and bourbon and so on, the hard stuff. And then after teaching a little while, at that time, I took that job selling on the road. And when I got on the road and traveling, there was a lot of loneliness, a lot of alone. You're alone a lot. You hang out in bars, and if some people do, I did.
Yes.
Anyway.
Sounds like Bill W.
And so that's, I think when I started traveling on the road, it started to get out of hand. And I made an attempt to get away from it a little bit when I took the job managing a golf course in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And I did get away from it, and it did slow it down, and for a few years. And but I think the real hard time was once I retired at age 60.
Yep.
From age 60 to 65, I drank every day.
And
every
now,
day.
were you still in
Pint of
Oregon
vodka,
then?
2 bottles of wine and a pint of vodka.
Ugh.
Every
I could
day.
never mix wine.
Dinner time.
Yeah.
I was dying. I
Yes.
was killing myself. And my wife, well, anyway, she is not to blame. But I decided that the only way I could get out of this whole thing was to divorce her and move. I had a condo here in Arizona, so I just moved to my condo down here. And, of course, met Pat, my neighbor. And so that's kind of when the really hard stuff was probably the worst in those 5 years. You know.
And then how long were you doing the salesman job?
Which job?
The salesman when you were traveling?
A couple years. And then I had one territory where I was up in Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And then after the Gulf, I decided I'd go back to it because the Gulf wasn't making me any money.
Right.
It was a poor situation for the family. So I went back to work for the book company in California. But I was home every night. And I didn't drink as much down there for a couple years in Los Angeles. I had a good territory. And
so when you wrote your memoir, so you wrote one originally, and that's called Bounce Back. Now, what is different between that one and your second one? I mean, how are the stories different?
For one way they're different is that in the Bounce Back book, the first book, I confronted a problem that also drove me to drink, was my father beat me till the age of 10 when I was in the 4th grade. And I had that child abuse on my mind. It ruined my relationship with my father. And what was the question again?
So, well, now that you're right there with talking about your dad, so you say that he beat you until you're 10. So what stopped it at the age of 10? Your dad hitting you?
I just got bigger. Yeah, I did. I just grew up, and he wasn't big enough anymore. And but it's certainly, we never ever had a relationship all the time. I have to say, I grew up in a family that didn't have any touching, no hugs, no kisses, no pats on the back. The sad truth is that my father never touched me, that he didn't hit me.
Oh, wow.
That's a realization I made while I was writing this material. I said, where is it? Where is all this love? Where is this? So I also, besides alcohol, I suffered from love addiction.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and then being a traveling salesman, one in every port or something. Yeah, so I was living quite a life on the road, and with alcohol and love addiction, and it was a totally separate life from my family.
Right.
Yeah, when I went to the golf course, that was one of the things I tried. I was trying to get out of that somehow. They get away from the alcohol or the easy access, and so.
And all the women.
And all the women, yeah, all the women.
So when you've done your recovery process, then did you actually do the steps with a sponsor?
Say that again.
Did you do the 12 steps? Did you do those?
Oh no, I didn't. No, Pat took me to my first AA meeting, and I would go with her, and we went to a number of conferences around the state. I think we didn't. Anyway, she got me introduced to it, and I never went through counseling except for Patricia. was very good.
Right.
She did a great job, I think, because here I am.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's when you guys got together, so Patricia, when you saw him and you saw him drinking the way that he was, what compelled you to maybe try to help him? One alcoholic helping somebody you think might be one of us?
Well, the first time we went out to dinner, obviously I didn't drink, and he had several, and then handed me the car keys at the end. And so I drove the car home, but in the 4 hours that we spent together, and the first time we went out, he just proved to me that he was a good person. I liked him. I liked what he was about. We talked about everything. We talked about his daughter going through a program and him going to Family Week. And I just could sense that he was ready to quit drinking, that he didn't want to drink anymore. And I basically said to him, I'd like to see you again, but I can't be with somebody that drinks.
Right.
And when he came to ask me to go out to eat that first time, it was just, gee, I like company for dinner, and I hemmed and hawed, and then I thought, oh, he's a nice man, I'll go. Well, of course, we've been together every day for 20 years. But I just sensed that, that he was ready, and we just talked about it from the get-go. And he's very in tune with the program. And as he said, we've gone to a lot of events and conferences and roundups and all of that together. And that's the choice that he had. But he was also in therapy all the time.
Right.
For
PTSD.
For the PTSD and the depression. So he had a lot of therapy, and he can tell you more about that. But I just knew that this was somebody worth the effort. And so we just talked very openly about everything.
That's awesome. So then, Earl, tell me a little bit about all of the types of therapy and stuff that you've had for your PTSD, and how has that transpired, and how do you feel about it now?
Actually, I haven't had a lot of therapy, other than Patricia, and who is very good at it. She's very in tune to life on this planet. She's very good. And I also was at a point where I really wanted to stop. And I think that's the two together made it work.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't go through therapy other than just depression. That's a wholly different situation. But
so did you do therapy for depression?
Yeah, I went to psychologists and psychiatrists for depression. I was diagnosed in high school that I was depressed, and it was a depression that would come and go. I would spend, like, maybe in a month I would be 4 days I would really be depressed. And I spent a lot of my life in that situation. And after we were married a few years, and in fact, from 1977 to 1980, 3 years, I developed really a dark depression where I wasn't good for anything or anybody. Just to live, I did crossword puzzles for 3 years.
Oh, wow. So it was a long depression.
Hard. Pat would want to go to the movies. I had to sit in the same seat every time we went to the movies. So we had to go a half hour early, make sure I could get the seat I wanted. I would, if we were going to take a trip, I would just possess over a corner on the highway that I knew was there and that we were going to have a wreck on it.
Oh, wow.
And this went on for 3 years. And the lighter side of things, I was playing golf. And at the first of this dark period, I was still playing. Pat would have to shove me out the door to get me to go play. I'd want to turn the car around to come on the way to the golf course because I didn't want to play. But I had to. I had this force of guys I played with for years and years. And it was hard to get out of the car once I got to the golf course. even to get my clubs. And if you ever play golf, you know that it's a difficult game to hit the ball where you want to. And if you were depressed along with it, it's really crazy. And so eventually I had to give it up. I just couldn't do it anymore. And but I was very lucky, not lucky actually, because I went through quite a few psychologists and psychiatrists. So I finally found the right psychiatrist who got my medication right.
Yes.
And I mean, I still take a lot of pills, and thank God I can, actually.
Right.
It got me out of the depression.
Awesome.
And so I drank a lot with that depression, too.
Yes, and we don't think about alcohol being a depressant, which is just going to make it worse,
Yeah.
but we feel like it's our only way out, and only because we don't have to think about stuff.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, Patricia, that might be dealing with somebody that is drinking or doing whatever, or just somebody that's depressed, what was that 3 years like for you, and how did you handle that? And do you have any tips for anybody that might be going through a similar situation?
Oh, I remember it well, that's for sure. And I just told myself I had to be patient, and I had to not be upset with him because he didn't want to play golf. And I remember the day he came home and said, I'm not playing golf anymore. And he was a very good golfer and had played since high school. And just kind of kiddingly, I said to him, well, why don't you want to play? And he said, oh, I'm playing like an old guy. And I said, well, you are an old guy. That's what happens, But so every once in a while I would just try to make light of things, but I always encouraged him if he didn't, to keep looking for that psychiatrist or that therapist that was going to help him. And we all know, like any industry, there's good and bad, and you really have to find the person that gets you. And I think because I had my own recovery, that I could just hang in there, for lack of a better explanation, and just see that, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And he didn't give up on it, but he would get some really low places, and he gave you a few examples. But it was hard to get him to go out and do things, and we just had to work with it. And that's really what I would say to people: is you just can't give up on your loved ones or somebody that's in your life or living in your home. You just can't. And if you can't figure it out, then find somebody that'll help you figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, you just can't give up on people, because we all know that they're not turning you away from them, and they're not shutting you out. They're just in that dark hole.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that with drug addiction and alcoholism, there are so many co-occurring disorders. Mm-hmm. And I believe that Earl's touched a little bit on that, is that we self-medicate. Mm-hmm. I don't want to think about my dad beating me. I don't want to think about, all the women that I've been with. I don't want to think about those things. So instead, I'm just going to drink. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you're in that really bad place, it's very difficult to realize, or to even care for that matter, that it's going to make things worse. Mm-hmm. It's just going to dig you into a deeper hole. Yeah. And I think that getting help for substance use disorder is the first step, and then maybe finding things out about that. And at Crossroads, we're really lucky. We are definitely substance use disorder treatment first, residential. We do IOP. We have Crossroads Aftercare program. We're doing a lot of stuff for that. But we also have assessments when people first come in with mental health. We are not a mental health facility. So please, everybody out there, don't think that's what I'm saying. We are not mental health. We're a substance use disorder, but we realize that there's a lot of co-occurring disorders. And if you're having problems with your substance use disorder, don't forget, we will help you no matter what. Look on our website at thecrossroadsinc.org, or give us a call at 602-263-5242. And if you want help for substance use disorder, and maybe even we can throw in a little bit of mental health, then give us a call or look on the website. We will most definitely help you. And Earl, so as you've walked through this process of writing these books, how long did it take you to write your books? And why did you decide to write a second one?
Well, let's see. First answer is took me about 4 years to write the first one, and took me, I published it in 1977, and I've been writing since.
Oh, wow.
What did I say?
2017.
2017.
2017.
I was going to say 1977. 2017, the first one's published.
2017, yes.
So it takes me about 5 years, 4 or 5 years to write them. And I wrote pretty much every day. Pretty much, yeah.
So your first one concentrated more on your young life then, like with your dad and stuff like that?
Yeah. I really wrote about that problem of abuse that I had suffered through. And some of the family didn't like it, of course, when I wrote about they didn't know this existed, and they don't think it did. But I wrote about that problem in the first book, a lot of it, and the second book is actually more about family. I've got some family friends, stories of myself and friends, and I wrote about the car wreck again in the second book. I wrote about it physically in the first book, how it took place, and a lot of it surrounding information. But in the second book, I wrote about it from the standpoint of the mind of the girl who lived, myself, and what it meant to the families of the people who died.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I changed it a little bit, but it's good.
So you've had contact with the other girl that lived then?
No, she won't see us. She won't. No, she won't. But Pat did something for me that really helped me and helped my PTSD. In that she got a hold of the family of the girl who died, and we went to Corvallis. They still live in Corvallis in Oregon, and her brothers and sisters, who are now, I guess, a few years younger than me, not too many, but we met with them at the home of one of the brothers of this girl. Since they didn't know much about this accident, there wasn't much about it because they were so young. They were really interested in finding out how it happened, whether we were drinking. They didn't know that. And of course, everybody thought we were, and we weren't. And there was, of course, this issue of the girl being 15 and me 21, that on campus, of course, I was not taught to very well of. And in fact, I had a nurse that would berate me in the hospital, and I had to get the doctor to change her. Asked the doctor, I said, I can't take this.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a hard feeling against me. And of course, Al was dead, my roommate, and the other girl was shipped to a Catholic school by her parents, out of the whole scene. So it was a trying time.
Probably a big O scandal for your little town.
Pardon?
A big O scandal for the little town.
Yes, it was a scandal. It was a scandal. I lost, some friends, and I was in a fraternity, and the fraternity didn't exactly come to my aid in it. They wanted to distance themselves from me. Yeah, you're right. It was a scandal, big scandal, and but it helped me to see the parents, or the the brothers and sisters of this girl, and we had a big evening, had dinner with them, and they filmed it, they recorded it, the meeting, and it was really worthwhile for me. Took a lot of pressure off me.
Right, so it's probably a really healing experience for you then.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic.
So, and you were there?
Yes.
With him? Mm-hmm. And what was your take on the whole thing, Patricia?
Well, I was really excited about it. And it's interesting because his sister-in-law, his brother's wife in Oregon, was concerned because she said that can go either way. That can backfire on. And we didn't think that way. Right from the beginning, we just didn't think that way. And so I was excited about it. So was he. And of course, you're a little nervous because we don't know much about them other than just, thank God for Facebook. That's where I found this woman.
Wow.
Yeah. And anyway, they have a huge family, and they had the kids there, the brothers, sisters, grandkids. There must have been 25 people in that house. And it just went well right from the get-go. They were kind and loving, and they immediately told my husband that they never blamed him.
Wow.
That they never blamed him. And that was so freeing for him. And he hasn't said it yet today, but I know it really eased the PTSD because they were just so receptive, us being there, and asked a lot of questions. And I'll let him tell you, or comment about the question about whether he kissed their sister or not. And tell him what Jean said. It's cute.
Well, yeah, the one sister asked me, was there any, hugging and kissing and all this stuff? And she was, I think, kind of embarrassed to ask it, but you have to remember that, she was, when this accident happened, she was a student in Brigham Young. Now she's 70-some years old, and that's been on her mind ever since that accident, whether there was drinking, whether there was something between me and her sister who died. So it was nice they got a lot out of it as well.
But what was the answer, Earl? Were you kissing the girl?
No. I'm pretty fast, but 20 minutes is...
That's what I was thinking. It's odd to me that it was such a big scandal when it was only 20 minutes, I guess, just back then, though. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that two 21-year-olds had two 15-year-olds in the car
exactly
was warrant for some kind of a big scandal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it would be almost now, too, so sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they weren't... they didn't really know how much I knew her, how well I knew her. It was something. Mm-hmm.
That had to have been a relief, though, to let people know. So I have a really difficult question maybe for you, but what was it about this accident that caused you to feel like you were responsible?
I think you feel responsible because you live.
Wow.
It's you almost wish you had died because you just feel guilty. Al was a fantastic guy, fantastic individual, and this little girl, a wonderful little girl. I write about religion in my second book, and I call it a skew look at religion, but I have a hard time with whether there's really a God when you can take a 15-year-old pretty little girl and kill her. If God does everything, and it's supposed to, he knows everything, how did that happen? That question is a big question in my mind, and I grew up in the church. I have a hard time with that even today.
Can I give an answer why I think that is?
Pardon?
Can I give you an answer to that question the way I see it?
Okay, yeah.
So for me, God has given man the right to choose, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, when I look at a situation like that, it always comes back to somebody's choice. Mm-hmm. Somebody maybe, and not to dog your friend, I'm not trying to do that, but Al was driving. Was he going too fast? Did he turn a corner too quickly? Did he make a choice? I have a cousin who, I guess it was when I was at Flower. So maybe in the last 8 to 10 years, she was in Wyoming and she decided she was going to try to beat an 18-wheeler to get on a little piece of highway. And she did not win. And her 2 children were with her. So her husband lost his wife, his 3-year-old, and his 1-year-old that quick. So, but I don't blame God for that because she made the choice to try to beat that truck. So it isn't about God to me, just my own personal thoughts.
Yeah.
It's not about God. It's about the choice that man makes in different situations. And for me, because I've got like that too. Like, I felt like right before I got in recovery, I didn't want anything to do with that guy because I felt like I was doing everything he wanted me to do. And he pulled the rug out from underneath me. But it wasn't him. It was choices other people made, and then it was choices I made.
Yeah.
So that has been able to help me and ease my mind because for me in my recovery process, he is everything to me to make my world go.
Yeah.
And so I had to, rectify all of those kind of self-doubts that I had about my recovery process. So that has just really helped me is that when I trace back things that I'm like, why is this happening? Like my mom's sick now. Why is it happening? I don't know. I don't know. And that's probably not anything to do with choices either. But it is the circle of life and the circle of death. So I don't know. Hopefully maybe you can ponder that a little bit later and it will help you.
Yeah.
It always comes back to me most of the times to a choice that somebody else has made. So
that's a good way to look at it.
It soothes me, because I got to find some justification in my head for why crap happens sometimes. So
something that he didn't mention that I think is important about the accident is that it wasn't Al's fault. Yes, he allowed those young women to get in the car, granted, but they weren't drinking, they weren't driving fast, as you mentioned, or any of that. They just came up over a hill and somebody crossed over the line and hit them head on. And they don't know, no one was ever convicted. They don't know if it was drinking involved with the people that came over the hill. So there are still a lot of unanswered things. And we even investigated and asked for the police report and newspaper headlines, which he had never seen before when he was writing the book, and these were sent to us. And part of the reason that so much attention was drawn to him was his picture with his baseball cap that said OSU on it is front and center on the front page of the paper when they talk about the accident, and they made sure everybody knew how old everybody was in the car. And
of course, because that sells headlines.
Right, right.
That sells the headlines.
Yeah, but unfortunately it was never solved. But there was supposedly a witness, and maybe you can tell her about, we called this supposed witness that was in the article, and he's still alive in Oregon. But go ahead, honey, tell her what happened with that.
Well, there was a witness mentioned in the paper when we did the research. So we looked him up. We found him. And he was lived in Salem, and he was an attorney. But he wouldn't talk to me.
Of course not.
Of course not. Yeah.
He's an attorney.
Yeah, he's an attorney.
That's too bad. But see, so whoever come up over that hill, there's where the choice is.
Yeah.
They weren't paying attention. They weren't, because if they had been, they'd have been on their side of the road. That's just kind of the way that I try to put things together so that it kind of gives me some kind of soothing or whatever you want to call it. So, well, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that, but I'm glad that you've been able to heal yourself partially by writing these memoirs. And thank you so, so much for coming today to share your story and give us a little bit of enlightenment. So where can these people find this book so they can read more of the details?
Well, they can find it on Amazon.
And the name is?
Intestinal Fortitude.
And it's Earl Goldmann, you guys out there.
Yeah.
So Intestinal Fortitude, Earl Goldmann, and you can find it on Amazon. And is Bouncing Back on there too?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
Yes,
both
it is.
of his memoirs are on Amazon. You can get them at any time. And again, Earl, thank you so, so much for coming. And Patricia, it's always such a pleasure
Thank you.
to see you and to have you on board too.
Thank you.
So thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Until
for having
next
us.
time.
Thanks for listening to Recovery on Air, the official podcast of Crossroads Addiction Rehabilitation, with your host, Donna Alexander. Join us next time as we continue our candid discussions about addiction and recovery. Listen 24/7 anytime to this or any of our shows online at starworldwidenetworks.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.